Yes, welcome back. You're still watching Power Breakfast, and we continue with our news review with Senators Agnes Zani, Aaron Cheriot, and Deputy Party Leader ANC Kipruto Rapkirwa. And during that break, our panel grew bigger. Senator Moses Kajwang from Hobart County joined us. Karibu sana, Senator.
Asante sana.
Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's getting old though.
It's never old. It is indeed a Happy New Year, but not very happy for Kenyans because of what happened yesterday. We had such huge hopes for CS for Foreign Affairs, AMINA Mohammed, in as far as a race for AUC chairperson was concerned. She lost out to Chadian Musa Faki Mahamat. But now, just before the break, we discussed the intrigues and what went behind the loss. But now we want to move the conversation forward, and discuss the prospects for the CS. Now, because she was going to move to a bigger job, and I'm sure quite a number of people must have been angling for her position back home. Now, what happens to her? Senator, let's start with you. What happens to CS AMINA Mohammed now that she has to come back home and return to her job?
Thanks, Fred. CS AMINA still has a job. She'll still be the Foreign Affairs CS for the Republic of Kenya. And I think for the remainder of Jubilee's term, which would end on 8th of August, she still has a job. She still has a full plate. I was not there when the conversation started, but just to give my perspective about this should not be an issue that is celebrated along partisan political lines. In my view, Kenya went to the international stage with a player, just like Kenya sends Harambee Stars to play on behalf of our nation. And when Harambee Stars loses, we should feel sorry about it. When we send our athletes to Rio and they do not perform optimally, we are not happy. But when they don't perform optimally, because some people are stealing boots and jerseys and kits, and part of the process has been messed up, if they don't perform optimally, and yet we see a lot of political sycophants at a place where they're not supposed to be. We saw a lot of politicians during yesterday. I remember seeing Aden Duale, I remember seeing the chair defense committee in the National Assembly, and a few other people I would call busybodies. It reminds you when Kenya sends athletes to Olympics and you have this crop of bureaucrats and MPs hanging around and having fun and taking selfies. So AMINA's loss is the nation's loss. It is not Jubilee's loss. What then we need to dissect will be, first of all, our neighbors who did not support us. What does that mean for our foreign policy? Because in my view, our foreign policy is a bully policy. But secondly, we must also ask the government functionaries and the approach with which we took AMINA to the global scale. Was it all inclusive? There is a perception that we were selling AMINA as an individual rather than selling Kenya as a country. Kenyans do not really understand what agenda and what benefit AMINA would bring by virtue of a position. And those of us who are much more enlightened, we know that if you have a Kenyan as a chair of the African Union, it's very good for branding. It's like having a Kenyan acting as a foreign minister for the entire Africa. When you look at social media, and especially yesterday, at around 2 o'clock, before the vote was even taken, there were tweets saying that AMINA had lost. They had not even done the first round. Like remember, yes, they went up to the seventh round. And in West Africa, people are laughing at Kenyans on Twitter, that Kenyans are celebrating the downfall of one of their own. That just tells you that when AMINA was presented to the African stage, Kenyans did not own her. Kenyans did not feel that she represented the aspirations the same way we own Harambee Stars when they go to play against other countries. Now,
CS AMINA Mohammed is perhaps one of about 2 or 3 most applauded cabinet secretaries in this administration. Now, what does this do to her, this loss? Because it's huge. Everyone is talking about it. AMINA Mohammed lost. It was a Jubilee project. There are people who feel it was not part of what they would have wanted to happen. What happens to her now that she's lost? She comes back here, moving forward.
Well, I don't think she lost because she didn't have it. So possibly she did not capture the position that she was aspiring for. But as Mheshimiwa said, she has a job, and the loss is insulated by the fact that all of us felt aggrieved. The issues that you saw in social media tells you something, that this country is polarized. And we should have involved even leaders across the divide, because they made it look like a Jubilee project. They should have allowed it that some of the leaders, even on the other side, who might have lost elections, they have a lot of influence in Africa. And they needed to be consulted. So these are some of the things that we overlook. Some of the other people that have won. I'm the most important person in town. Nobody else can do the job better than me. And that is where we go wrong as a nation.
And it is indeed a problem, because anything happening in Kenya, you first think, okay, where are my allegiances? Am I Jubilee or the other side?
But I think it's not a process that happens in utopia. It's a process that happens because of the machinations. How much did we do to actually make sure we have mobilized? How much do? We go back again to the issues of dialogue. And in different countries and across most of these African countries, they have a processes. And if you look even at social media, you're not seeing a sense of this polarization that you're seeing that we have. They must have ways of dealing with it. And we've been advocating for exactly this. Let's be able to, if we create dialogue and make dialogue a part of our culture, some of these things become very natural. We're able to dialogue and say, this is how we want to go. But unfortunately, leaderships have created a sense of, this is what we want. And I think maybe this is also a message that bulldozing is not the final end. It doesn't mean that you're going to succeed, because I think we are used to a process of bulldozing and 100% sure that it'll work. We need to go back again to the drawing boards and look at what is a priority for us. This was an African, African process. We were involved in it at a Kenyan level. We needed to have looked through the process and had a non-partisan, sort of less polarized. But you cannot just one day wake up and just change your values and your modes and your attitudes and your way of doing things. This has to be something that has to be inbuilt, and this is very, very important, even in the long run, for so many other things. It's important for peace, it's important for foreign policy, it's important with the way we do things. And I think the cracks began to show a long time with EAC, the East African community, and the problems that the East African community has had in terms of integration. So they've agreed, for example, we're going to have integration at one level, but certain things, for example, the money aspect has not been completely sorted. Issues, for example, the sort of hardware issues, issues of passports moving in from one country to another, that has been done. But the soft issues, and this actually tells us as East Africans that we have a way not to address the issues, and this time it has costed us. And I don't know whether we are able to move to that level that we can quickly be able to amass the whole situation, get back, start talking to Uganda, get back, because again also if we have an attitude like these people are looking at us, we're doing very well, they're not doing, it's not a question of
it's only natural that everyone will feel offended. Uganda did this
doing well is relativist. It's about relativism. It's across various indicators. Those indicators have to be included. So I think Amina put in her best shot, and looking really at the performance that she's had, it was the best shot that she went into it, and she did well because she actually started by leading. But I think all these issues really make it very imperative for us to go back to the drawing boards and look at ourselves, one, as a bloc, but secondly and more important, as a country. That sense of unification and focus, and this thing of not just throwing words at the other side and just speaking because you feel you own it all. That mentality has to stop.
Finally, Senator Cheruiyot, now sitting on my right, Senator Kajwang described Senator Kajwang described the Jubilee administration's foreign policy as a bully policy. Do you agree?
I don't think so. And it boils down to what we've been discussing all morning, that our view of politics is a bit polarized, and sometimes we want to challenge our colleagues, especially Senator Kajwang, the coalition that he speaks for, to do politics that has principle. Let it not be politics for politics' sake, which is what sadly we're observing even with this AMINA issue. Many other times that you listen to the kind of words and language that are used, by leaders from his side, and you wonder, then why do you want to lead such a useless institution as Kenya may be, if you don't believe in it? Where is the nationhood? Where is the belief that there is something that is bigger, above and beyond the divide that we see in our politics? Because when you are told to list, for example, if somebody was to challenge you, Fred, and list the top 3 diplomats that we have in this country, I'm more than sure that out of every 10 Kenyans, 9 will have AMINA, CS AMINA on that list. She has done a stellar job. I mean, we've listed the kind of world leaders that have trooped into this country in the last 3.5 years of this administration. That alone is testament of her credentials and the kind of work that she has done. It tells you that these people are not just coming here to go to Masai Mara or have some sun at the beach. There's something serious they've seen that is happening in Kenya. if we were bullying people, they wouldn't be trooping here. But because they appreciate that something is being done despite the challenges. We've seen so much invite for them, people wanting partnerships with this country. Nobody, and this is not even on the political stage alone. Look at even the global business scale. Every international business player, be it from whatever kind of industry, they are trooping here into this country.
Yes.
And that tells you that something good is being done. It needs to be appreciated. Let's just not, for the sake of scoring political points, say things are bad and there's nothing.
It cannot be a political point. For example, when we know, for example, in the East African communities, there's already been a big issue because of the coalition of the willing.
But it didn't begin with Jubilee. These challenges have been there all along.
These challenges are there, but the government of the day either helps them to be diffused or they don't end up being diffused.
Two other specific examples. Sorry, Senator. Two other specific examples. Just three. The last address to the nation by the president, that was on
the one you interrupted.
No, not that one. This one we are allowed to proceed. On Jamhuri Day, the president went on an unnecessary, angry tirade against foreign powers and talked about foreign influence. And after that, there was a crackdown on civil society. But there are two other specific issues which put to question Kenya's commitment to be seen as a pan-African vanguard. One is on the refugee issue. You know, the winner of yesterday's contest, one of the things he said is going to be a priority is the issue of immigration and the migrants crisis. It is embarrassing for Africans to get onto rickety boats to go to Europe where they are going to be treated as second-rate citizens. And yet Kenya flushes out Somalis, tells them to go back to Somalia, where we have a force, where they are terrorists, where there is Al-Shabaab. So how do you talk about the migrant crisis in Africa when you cannot tolerate your neighbors? The second aspect is ICC. Look at the manner in which you went around the ICC. If bully is not the word for it, then give me another word that is
my goodness. Well, but this is an African problem. You've seen South African Parliament. What decision did they make? And so many other African countries that have pronounced themselves on this ICC issue. You remember very well that when this issue came to the AU, the kind of discussion and the vitriol that was being poured by every African nation about the challenges that we are facing at the ICC. So you cannot reduce it to say this was a Kenyan problem that was being solved in sort of like
one of the clearest things, and I think one of the clearest things that comes from this discussion on what happened yesterday is that foreign policy, foreign relations is indeed something that we need to talk about. It is an election year. We rarely discuss that. We'll talk about corruption, agriculture, how much you're making from coffee and tea, healthcare, and these are things. But foreign relations do affect our country directly, but we rarely discuss these things. And it is high time we do that. But I beg my panel that we move on to other headlines because we have quite a lot to discuss. And of course, the issue about why AMINA lost will continue making headlines. But let's look at education now. And of course, it has to do with another cabinet secretary who's equally received quite some applause, Fred Matiang'i. And this year, after successful implementation of reforms on the examination system last year, now we're moving to curriculum change. And yesterday, a stakeholders forum took place in Nairobi, and we're going to see a rollout, probably a pilot trials as early as May, and a full rollout, if we're to go by what the stakeholders discussed, as early as January next year. Now this is a complete shift from what we've seen with the 844 system that we've had for decades now. The headline on the standard says, a new system to replace 844, new education structure passed, focus shifts to implementation. It has the number of years broken down there on the front page. But on the Daily Nation, it's more direct. No more exams in school system. KCP and KCSE to be replaced by continuous tests under a new and more flexible structure that places more emphasis on talent and interests. Fred Matiang'i aside, Are we getting it right?
I think we want to believe that for the first time at least somebody has decided to take the bull by the horns. We've always known that there was a problem in our education system. We are churning out so many managers in our structured education system where we are all doing all these management courses, but without telling them what they are going to manage. That's why these streets of this country are full of graduates that cannot do anything. We've seen even more damning reports that have told us we have kids that are in class 8 but cannot solve a class 2 mathematical equation. That by and large tells you that there was a problem in how our education system was organized, and also one of the most painful thing was the fact that we had reduced the 8 years to be collapsed into a simple exam that is done within 1 or 2 weeks, such that if it happens, say, Fred, you're unwell in these 2 weeks, even if you've been a brilliant performer in the last 8 years, it counts for nothing. And for me, that was the biggest flaw in our education system. And if somebody has thought it twice and they've said we've got to review and find ways to let education be a continuous learning process that can be assessed gradually other than being assessed at a particular point, to me that is a big plus for this country. So I support this move. I hope it will go on to move us from being more of a knowledge economy to a skill-based kind of economy, because we have so much that we can do. So many of these idle young people, if they had the necessary skill, you know, if you've given them enough vocational training to know that you can move with your hands, you don't have to be a blue-collar person seated in a particular office to make it in life, then we are beginning to build something that we can be proud of as a country.
Thank you, Fred. The education sector has been very interesting because it's one of the first ones that had commissions that worked on education and came up with very, very good reports through Kamunde report, through Koech report, that suggested many changes. It's a good move, but I think also it's a reflection of very poor regime changes over time in Kenya. We're going back exactly where we went to. As you know, we're really talking back again about a system that is a 663 system. That's exactly what we had before. Of course, with the component of the 2 years for the pre-primary education. So we've gone back exactly where we were. 30 years later, why have we gone back again exactly where we were 30 years later? In a very sort of shift change completely, because what is the implication of this? It's an implication of changing everything completely. It means changing textbooks, it means changing policy, it means changing curriculum. Now look at other countries and give me examples of countries that have done this. I don't think there's any that has done this. There would be a way in which we can infuse some of these values and some of these changes, because by the time even the Kamunde report advocated for the 844, the reasoning then is that we don't have the technical skills. We went into an 844 that still did not give these technical skills, and even as we have people who are there looking for jobs, they have probably a capacity to the jobs, but that's another question, because the jobs don't exist, because again the regimes have not been able to create this sort of employment. So yes, the values that this system stands for are values that are good in an educational system, and I know many people have moved into private education that offers exactly this, you know, so that you have the skill content coming through, so that you don't have to be judged at one exam point. But then how are we going to implement this again is very, very we need to be very, very careful about it, one. And two, really, that I'm hoping that again after 20 years, I think we need to come up with a policy about even how we make the changes and how we infuse these changes. And the fact that this has been a sector that is so well supported means most of these reports are going to the shelves, because most of these things are not new things at all. It's really just the environment for implementation is there. We must also then have a cautionary measure that we don't have with exactly the same situation where we hoped 844 would address specific things. 844 was not able. 844 went back into exactly a formal system. When we started off with 844, I remember we had carpentry classes here and there, but they disappeared within a very short time. We are moving again into a system where we need to ensure these values are so entrenched so that we don't have, for example, that young girl who has been killed because after a beating because she cannot read, you know.
And the headline Senator Zani is referring to is also on the front page of the Daily Nation. People beaten to death for failing to read. A standard 3 people has died after she was beaten up by her teacher and classmates because she could not read. The 10-year-old died on Sunday in Laikipia Hospital. That's a very sad story.
It's a very sad story.
But let's come back to this...
but let me just finish, Fred, because I brought that in, because I wanted to say that it's very important that even as we set these values, that we can set the parameters that this educational system is able to capture that. Let Joy, I think is her name, let her skills, maybe she's good at singing, let her thrive on the skill that she's good at singing, at art, at creativity. And I think this is what this system is all about.
But how does this tie into politics and regime change in terms of getting a new president, a new administration? Because we know that 844 came with the KANU, President Moi's government. Now, of course, successive regimes, President Mwai Kibaki, when he came into office, that's when some of these things, discussions about abolishing 844 started again. Now, it is an election year. We, of course, when it comes to education, we seem to be placing a lot of responsibility on this CS who we see that he's doing a good job. But what happens? Let's say, for example, Jubilee administration or your coalition manages to remove Jubilee from power. What happens to such a discussion?
Well, I don't think we are so myopic as to lose focus on a good cause like this program. But let's remind ourselves, when we started the 844, we said it was going to instill in young people technical skills requisite for certain jobs. But what we've done over the years is that we have refused to look at the market. Why don't we go to the market first, check what does the market want, then prepare our students towards that particular market. You go to many schools funded by CDF and other programs now through devolution, and you find some of the people dealing or building do not have any skills at all. So that a building, by the time it is almost being roofed, is about to collapse. So it's a question of standardization. Number two, as a trained teacher, I do understand that the essence of an exam is to standardize so that a child, when he gets grade A or B, has been taken through a process that is fair. Now, my worry is this is going to be mass production of trying to standardize when the standards are not very clear. One school in Turkana, another school in Marsabit, another school in Trans Nzoia or Kwale, do they have the same parameters in terms of teaching? If we've been worried about exam cheating at the level of Form 4 and Standard 8, what guarantee that the pupils are not just going to be passed en masse through the process because every school wants to do well? We must now go back and ask ourselves, what programs do we have in ensuring that a pupil that gets A in school 1 is the same pupil has the same skills and capacity as a student who gets another A so many miles away from there. Yes. I think that's much more important.
So do you share the same fears as Bonakiro?
I do agree with the Deputy Party Leader and the NASA stalwart on education. You know, Fred, I'm a product of 844. I don't think I've turned out badly. And you wouldn't have called me here. Anyway, the 844 had its positives. You cannot condemn an entire generation of Kenyans. In fact, it's almost 2 generations of Kenyans. Out of that, we've got people like Igara, who's CEO of KCB. We've got many people. You cannot count them on one hand. There are hundreds and thousands and millions of Kenyans who have gone through that system and have gone ahead to do things that are stellar, things that are remarkable. But experts say that you need to review your curriculum at least every 5 years. And we established the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, KICD, and I think it was through an act of parliament. I've got quite some confidence in the leadership of KICD, especially Dr. Juan. He's someone I know at a personal level, and I know the passion with which he approaches this matter. So let the experts, KICD, established by an act of parliament, do their job of advising the nation on what would be the best approach to education and curriculum content and curriculum approach. But the devil is usually in implementation. And these are the issues that the unionists, particularly the unions that represent teachers, who will be the implementing agencies of this new curriculum, are talking about. You want to introduce this new curriculum when you have not trained teachers. You can't. You know, you can't introduce computers to a school when teachers who are supposed to teach computers have not been trained on them. So in the same way, teachers need to be trained, and that roadmap needs to be very clear, so that Sosion and Misori of Kupet would not be the ones saying that they don't know what this is all about.
For example,
so
do you agree with Sosion's claims that this thing is being rushed, and we should probably wait until 2019 to start implementation of this?
2019 might be a little bit far, but remember, this new curriculum was supposed to have been implemented in January 2016. We are now in 2017. Education reform sometimes can be a very big issue for politics and government. Even if you go back to the French Revolution, and when Napoleon took over power, one of the things Napoleon did was, beyond the codification of laws, was significant education reforms, which put the French Republic way above other countries in Europe when it came to education. So it's something, if it is done well, it can be a key achievement for any government. And what we are seeing, and the rush to implement these media when school's calendar begins at the beginning of the year, you start seeing some likelihood that this is an issue that some people want to use when it comes to the elections, that we are the ones who brought in education reforms. But let us not play politics with the lives of our children. Just to finalize on this, I wish there could also be a discussion on infrastructure, because curriculum is software. How do you bring in such a glitzy, fresh curriculum into Harambee schools? We are the politicians. Every weekend we spend our time raising funds to set up schools out there. In fact, if I wanted to be revolutionary,
which is now illegal because you should not be taking part in the Harambee.
Yes, and Aaron, take this to the president or Matiang'i. I would put a very heavy fine on private schools, to the extent of close to, you know, almost banning them. Because why must we encourage a system in Kenya where you've got a thriving private education sector competing with the mainstream education sector? It's the same scenario we have even in healthcare, that no one cares whether doctors are on strike, because there are enough private hospitals to take care of the rich and the bourgeois. The same thing with education. So what's going to happen if this fails in public schools? We are going to send our children to Makini.
Senator Cheriot, of course, you must agree that if this goes well and it works out, it is a plus for Jubilee.
Of course,
so definitely ties with the elections in August.
Of course it is, and that, but that shouldn't be the main center of our focus. We have so many other things to display, as opposed to, you know, education is such a serious issue, and this goes back even to the point that we were discussing earlier, that as we try to organize our politics in preparation for 2017, it will be interesting to know what is the position of, for example, CORD leadership on this matter. You know, these are not things that you get to hear about them in political rallies. Such that in the very unlikely event that they get to have a win come August of this year, we'd be assured that this system will not be thrown back to the shelves, as has always been the case, because this is such a serious matter. We know that public education sector had almost gotten to a point of near collapse. We no longer have the glory days where you'd get to hear of the exam results and all you read about are good public schools. When you think, for example, of Nairobi, where I'm more familiar with, you'd hear about schools like PD, Utawala in Abakasi, Olympic in Kibera. You know, schools that used to do so well. We almost got to a point whereby everybody, we just used to know that public school is for the poor who cannot afford to take their children to these academies. But this is such a step in the right direction, that it aims to bring sanity first to public education, and then secondly it looks into the pitfalls and aligns our vision as a country. You know, we aspire as Kenya to be an industrialized economy by 2030. We cannot industrialize if 60 to 70% of our population do not have even very basic skills like what Mheshimiwa Kiro was mentioning. You don't have people who can do masonry, you don't have people who can do welding. We've got to import even the very basic skills. We've got to become net, you know, up to now as a country we are net importers of even very basic things, because we lack in terms of skill. And this kind of direct approach to this to this problem will help us to achieve this. Even kids who don't score an A because they are not so good at math know that I can excel in something like masonry, carpentry, and still have a great life.
Okay.
I think it would be worrying if we only use that as a political gimmick rather than a true change at an educational system, because it takes much more than that. It takes much more than that, because you've got to look, one, at the structures, make sure these structures are in place. The reason why 844 did not go very well is because those structures were not in place. It produced very good educationists, but exactly of the type of the old regime, because this was a system that should have produced more people who should have been gone into TVET centers. But I think also I'm talking about exams, because again we have to be very careful not to be sensationalist, because this again might actually bring down the standards completely, that people have been used to so many exams, and then suddenly if there's a sense of no exams and therefore it's complete free play. We must be very clear that a lot of learning will be taking place, and it's not exactly no exams. 30% of the marks will be allocated through some sort of an exam that will be done. It's only 70% I think that will be done through continuous tests, and this needs to be very, very clear and very, very well stipulated. And I think we shouldn't then also go into the debate about private and public, chastising private, because private are doing their job. We should actually move towards enhancing public, and this is where exactly the realm of the government is. So for example, if you've promised laptops, let's see those many things that we are saying have been done. Let's have those laptops. Let's have these teachers trained. Let's do the. Let's not politic too much about things, because this is really about an important education matter.
Yes, indeed. Of course, what you're discussing is about the change in education curriculum from the current 844 to the now proposed 2663. The authorities indicate that the piloting phase could start as early as May and a full rollout as early as January next year. Let's now take a short break. When we return, we'll discuss some politics as well as the doctor's strike that is now on its 58th day.